get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. So glad you could be with us, whether you tuned in at www.behindenemylinesradio.us or if you're checking us out on AM radio, FM radio, the internet radio. However you tuned in, we're glad that you're locked and loaded with us this week for another big week of news, or if we're traveling along with you as a podcast. Thanks for taking us along for the ride, and like I said, a huge week, huge with a capital Y, a huge week of news here behind enemy lines. We got some local stuff, some national stuff, some international stuff, some local stuff with national implications, some national stuff with some international ramifications, a whole lot to talk about. So let's get to it right now, shall we? Yes, let's. So obviously the first big news we have to talk about this week is, well, I'll let President Trump say it himself. But as we all know, this was the week that the president would decide what to do about a problem called Iran. And the Iran nuclear deal and his final decision, it got down to final answer time for the president. And as expected, at least by me, here's what he did.
After these consultations, it is clear to me that we cannot prevent an Iranian nuclear bomb under the decaying and rotten structure of the current agreement. The Iran deal is defective at its core. If we do nothing, we know exactly what will happen. In just a short period of time, the world's leading state sponsor of terror will be on the cusp of acquiring the world's most dangerous weapons. Therefore, I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. In a few moments, I will sign a presidential memorandum to begin reinstating U.S. nuclear sanctions on the Iranian regime. We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. Any nation that helps Iran in its quest for nuclear weapons could also be strongly sanctioned by the United States. America will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail. We will not allow American cities to be threatened with destruction, and we will not allow a regime that chants death to America to gain access to the most deadly weapons on earth.
We're out of there. Peace out. See you later. Wouldn't want to be Iran. President Trump did the absolute right thing here, withdrawing from the nuclear deal. And while I'm not an expert on this, if you've been a fan of the show for any length of time and listened last year, this is a topic, the Iran nuclear deal, that we covered at length. We've really tried to educate our audience on this issue quite a bit. We've listened to experts who are actually Iranian nationals who are part of a coalition that has been resisting the Iran regime from outside for decades, including our friend Alireza Jafarzadeh, who came on the show a few times. And, we've played this stuff before. And, it really is a complex issue. I'm not saying it's an easy decision what President Trump did, but before we get into a discussion of the deal itself, I want to just flash back real quick to parts of this interview that we did with Alireza Jafarzadeh. And his involvement and his organization's involvement, the National Council for Resistance of Iran, what they've done, their history with monitoring Iran's nuclear capabilities. And, it dates back to 2002 when they first discovered different nuclear sites in Natanz and other places within Iran that the world didn't know about, that really opened up Iran to the international community and the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, were first brought in thanks to the work by Alireza and his organization. So take a listen to this background to see how we got to this point, and we'll come right back. You and your organization were the first to uncover the then unknown nuclear sites in Iran, correct?
Absolutely correct, Gene. It was August 14, 2002, some 15 years ago, that we had a press conference in Washington, and we revealed the existence of two nuclear sites in Natanz and Iraq that would eventually, that was in the process of developing, and they would give two different pathways to the fissile material for a bomb for the Iran regime. That revelation on that day changed the whole dynamics about the attention of the world on the nuclear program of Iran, because on the same evening, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the UN nuclear watchdog, requested a visit to these sites. And eventually, a few months later, they managed to get their first visit ever to the nuclear sites of Iran, and that's where they found centrifuge machines in Natanz and a pretty advanced development of a heavy water facility in Iraq, and all of the things started afterwards. And we have continued ever since with the revelation of other nuclear sites of Iran, or projects, or top nuclear scientists, or the front companies that they use to cover their operations and the program. We also delved into the core of the nuclear program of Iran, which is of a military nature. The nuclear program is not built around giving them nuclear energy. Rather, it's built around giving them nuclear weapons. And everything else is pretty much like a facade around it. So we give a lot of details since then until now. It's about 100 different nuclear revelations about the various sites and personnel or experts of the nuclear program of Iran so far.
So you see, folks, we know from whence we speak. We tried to get as much expertise as we could on this issue. Alireza is a gentleman who's very well knowledgeable, has been on the ground. He's lost family in Iran. He's an Iranian national who came over to America. And this has been his life. This has been, his life's calling, his mission, if you will, to highlight the wrongdoing of this regime and to educate people on why a nuclear Iran is the worst scenario, not only for the region, but for the world as a whole. And back when we talked to Alireza, he broke down why President Trump back then should have scrapped and withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. His reasoning behind it, what he would have recommended. Back, if you remember, he said he was contemplating it. Congress had 60 days to make a recommendation. There was this whole big thing going on in 2017 about the deal. Ultimately, President Trump was not ready then, but he's ready now, and the reasoning still is quite sound. So let's go back to Alireza and what he had to say last year about reasons to withdraw from this deal. How do you feel about initially when this deal was made with Iran that President Obama seemingly, jammed down everyone's throat here in America? How do you feel about that deal?
Well, the nuclear agreement between the the 5+1, as they call it, the
Right.
5 members of the Security Council in Germany and the Iranian regime that was worked out eventually in mid-2015, put some restrictions on the overt part of the nuclear program of Iran in terms of like limiting the number of centrifuges or how much uranium hexafluoride they can produce, that kind of things. But the major problem with that is that first, that nuclear agreement legitimized the enrichment, uranium enrichment of the Iran regime, which is absolutely not necessary at all. It should have been entirely rejected. Second, it maintained the entire nuclear infrastructure of the Iranian regime, though limiting it in some aspects, which is a big problem. You don't want to allow the Iran regime to have that kind of a nuclear operations and structures for whatever purposes, because there's no other purpose but building the bomb as far as the Iran regime is concerned. And third, it allowed the enhancement of the program by allowing them certain, research and development activities, which in the long run actually helps the regime with more advanced centrifuge machines. And fourth, and most importantly, is the inspection regime, the access to the nuclear sites that are actually very limited, and the main nuclear sites of Iran that are focused on the weaponization part of the program, on building the actual nuclear warhead and developing it, are actually primarily in military sites, and those have practically been off limits. The International Atomic Energy Agency does not have currently access to those sites. A couple of weeks ago, they released a new book called Iran's Nuclear Core, that details 6 different nuclear sites in Iran with all the maps, the locations, the personnel, and showing that these sites are engaged in nuclear weaponization but have been off limits. The IAEA hasn't gone to those places. So how can you give a clean bill of health to the nuclear program of Iran if you can't even inspect the main suspect sites that are engaged in those things? So these are major problems with the nuclear agreement. And, whether they want to fix those problems or come up with something new, I think it's something that the Congress is going to look at. They have 60 days to look at it. But I think in the meantime, we need to look at the Iranian regime and Iran as a whole. The threat from Iran, the Iran regime, is not just their nuclear weapons program. They have a very advanced missile program, which is a necessary part of their nuclear program. They need the delivery system. Then they are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism in the region and elsewhere. They're exporting their Islamic extremism to the countries in the region. Look how heavily they're involved in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, you name it. And then the Iran regime is a major violator of human rights. They're the number one per capita executioner in the world. And the situation has even worsened under the regime's president, who just started his second term, Hassan Rouhani. And the other aspect that is extremely important for the outside world to know, especially for this administration, the new administration, as they're crafting the new policies, that there is a very genuine, potent, and capable organized opposition to the Iranian regime that relies on the vast majority of the population who are opposed to this regime. This regime represents no more than 4% of the population. This is according to one of the top 3 presidential election candidates of the regime itself, one of the top, generals, who said that we are a government of 4%.
So there you go. A lot to digest here. The points are all salient points. The biggest reason for me, as I was listening to Alireza and what he had to say, was by giving them this deal, by legitimizing their nuclear program, their enrichment programs,